All right, today we're going to dive into something really fascinating, a type of spinal cord injury that's actually pretty common, but it presents this real medical mystery.
So, I want you to imagine something for a second. Let's say you're in an accident, and afterwards you realize your arms are weak. Like maybe you can't even use your hands, but you can still stand up and walk around. That just sounds backwards, right? Well, that exact counterintuitive scenario, that's the classic sign of a condition we're talking about today, central cord syndrome.
So let's get into it. The name central cord syndrome kind of gives it away, right? The injury happens smack dab in the center of the spinal cord. And what's really important to know is that it's the most common type of incomplete spinal cord injury. That means the cord isn't totally severed, so some nerve signals can still sneak past the damage. Okay, so here's the official breakdown. Central cord syndrome, or CCS for short, is an injury right in the middle of the cervical spinal cord. That's the part up in your neck. And its absolute hallmark, the thing that makes doctors immediately think CCS, is that the weakness is way worse in the upper limbs, your arms and hands, than it is in your legs.
So, you might be wondering who actually gets this? Well, it's interesting because there are two very different groups of people who are most at risk.
Yeah, these two groups couldn't be more different. On one hand, you've got older adults, usually over the age of 50. And for them, believe it or not, it can happen from something as simple as a fall, one that snaps their head back. This is often because they have something called cervical spondylosis, which is just a fancy way of saying age-related wear and tear in the neck that's already squeezing the spinal cord. Then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have younger folks. For them, it's almost always caused by some kind of major high-speed trauma. Think a serious car crash.
Let's walk through how this happens, especially for that older group. So first, the neck gets jolted backward. That's called hyperextension. That motion literally pinches or bruises the spinal cord. And here's the key. Because of how the spinal cord is wired up, it's the fibers right in the middle, the ones that control the arms, that get hit the hardest.
This is such a great way to picture it. Just think of your spinal cord like a big, complex bundle of wires, okay? The super long wires that travel all the way down to your legs, they're arranged around the outside of the bundle. But the wires for your arms, and especially for your hands and all those fine movements, they run right through the very center, the most vulnerable spot. So when that cord gets compressed, damn, those central fibers are the first to get damaged, and they often get damaged the most.
And that anatomy right there, that explains everything. So let's talk about the classic signs and really get to the bottom of this whole arms versus legs mystery.
You can see it laid out perfectly here. When it comes to the arms and hands, we're talking about a major loss of motor function. And it's those delicate, fine motor skills, like buttoning a shirt, holding a fork, writing your name, that are hit the hardest. Meanwhile, you look at the legs and feet, and they're often spared, or just mildly affected. It's a bizarre scene, but it's true. A patient might literally walk into the hospital but not be able to sign their own admission forms. But it's not just about weakness. There are other key symptoms to look out for. There's often sensory loss below where the injury happened. Sometimes it shows up in this weird cape-like pattern across the shoulders and down the arms. Bladder problems are also super common, specifically not being able to pee. And on top of all that, many people feel this awful burning pain, especially in their arms and hands.
Okay, so that's the problem. It sounds pretty daunting. But what about the solution? What does the road to recovery actually look like? Let's get into how this thing is diagnosed and, more importantly, managed.
Well, the diagnosis is pretty straightforward. Doctors match up the clinical signs we just talked about, that classic arms worse than legs weakness, with what they see on medical imaging. An MRI is really the best tool for the job here because it can actually show the bruising or swelling right in the center of the cord. It's the smoking gun, basically.
Now, you might think surgery is the first step, and sometimes it's needed to, say, stabilize the spine. But the real work, the main event in recovery, happens somewhere else entirely. This quote says it all. Rehabilitation is the cornerstone of management. It's all about regaining as much function as you possibly can. This is where the grind truly starts.
And that work is incredibly focused. Physical and occupational therapy is all about one thing: getting your life back. So what do? They work on improving muscle strength, especially in those arms and hands. They help you relearn how to do daily activities. They work on your balance and mobility, which is so important for preventing future falls. They help manage pain and stiffness. And this is a big one, they educate you on how to stay safe going forward. So after all that work, what does the future hold for someone with central cord syndrome? What can they expect? Let's talk about the prognosis.
And you know what? The news is actually pretty good, for the most part. The outlook is generally hopeful. If you look at this chart, the chances of being able to walk again are really, really high for most people. Getting bladder control back, also a good likelihood. But, and here's the tough part, regaining full hand function, that's a lot less predictable. That right there is often the biggest, most frustrating long-term challenge.
What's fascinating is that the recovery process itself follows a pretty set pattern. It's almost like the body is healing from the ground up. First, you get strength back in your legs, then bladder function returns. After that, you start to see strength coming back in the arms. And the very last thing to come back, if it does, is that super delicate fine motor control in the hands. It's a step-by-step process.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that while recovery is definitely possible and many people do very well, it's not a guarantee, especially when it comes to your hands. And that just hammers home how critical prevention is. At the end of the day, the best treatment is to never have the injury to begin with, right? Especially by preventing those falls in older adults.
And that really leaves us with a much bigger question to think about. We know our population is aging all over the world. So how can we, as a society, do a better job of preventing the very injuries that lead to this life-changing syndrome in the first place? It's a huge challenge and definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.
Wow.